The Texas sun hung like a burning coin in the endless blue sky, casting its merciless heat across miles of untouched desert. John Cena had traded the roar of wrestling crowds for something he desperately needed: silence. No cameras, no interviews, no schedule demanding his every moment. Just him, a borrowed horse, and the vast emptiness that stretched beyond the horizon. He had left the small border town of Hudra at dawn, following an old cattle trail that meandered through creosote bushes and scattered mesquite. The horse beneath him was steady and sure-footed, a weathered mare named Luna that belonged to his friend's ranch. Her hooves clicked against sun-baked stones as they climbed higher into the desert hills, leaving civilization further behind with each step. The wrestling world knew John Cena as an unstoppable force, a man who never backed down from any challenge. But out here, surrounded by the raw power of nature, he felt something different. The desert had a way of making even the strongest man feel small. It demanded respect, patience, and humility. These were lessons the ring had never taught him. As morning stretched toward noon, the heat became almost unbearable. Sweat soaked through his cotton shirt, and the wide brim of his hat provided little relief from the sun's assault. Luna's breathing grew heavier, and foam gathered around her bit. They needed rest, but the landscape offered few options. Rolling hills of sand and rocks stretched endlessly, broken only by the occasional saguaro cactus standing like ancient sentinels against the sky. Cena guided Luna along a dry creek bed, hoping to find shade or perhaps a trickle of water. The arroyo twisted between red stone walls that rose 30 feet on either side, creating a natural corridor through the desert. Here, at least, they found temporary relief from the sun's direct assault. The temperature dropped several degrees, and both rider and horse seemed to breathe easier. But it was in this moment of respite that Cena first felt it, that prickle of awareness that every athlete knows. The same instinct that warned him when an opponent was about to strike, when danger lurked just beyond perception. Something was different about this place. The silence was too complete. Even the ever-present buzz of cicadas had faded to nothing. He pulled Luna to a stop and listened. Nothing. Not even the whisper of wind through the canyon. The stillness was so profound it felt almost supernatural, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Cena had spent years learning to trust his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being was on high alert. That's when he saw it. Rising from the canyon floor about 50 yards ahead stood a saguaro cactus unlike any he had ever seen. It was massive, easily 40 feet tall, with arms that reached toward the sky like the limbs of some ancient giant frozen in prayer. But size alone wasn't what caught his attention. There was something wrong with its base, something that didn't belong in the natural world. Cena dismounted and led Luna closer, his boots crunching on the gravelly ground. With each step, the abnormality became more apparent. At the base of the enormous cactus, pressed against its trunk like a tumor, was a bulging growth that defied explanation. It wasn't the natural ridging and ribbing of cactus skin. This was something else entirely. He dropped Luna's reins and approached the cactus alone. The growth was roughly the size of a large watermelon, but its surface was hard and unyielding beneath his touch. When he tapped it with his knuckles, instead of the dull thud he expected from plant tissue, he heard something else, a hollow metallic ring that sent chills down his spine. Cena circled the cactus slowly, studying the strange protrusion from every angle. The plant had clearly grown around whatever was inside, wrapping it in layers of living armor over what must have been many years. Decades, perhaps. Someone had hidden something here, buried it deep within the flesh of this desert giant, never expecting it to be discovered. His father's voice echoed in his memory, words spoken during camping trips in his childhood. The desert never forgets, son. It keeps everything, holds onto secrets longer than any man lives. But sooner or later, it gives them back. At the time, those words had seemed like colorful storytelling. Now, standing before this impossible sight, they felt like prophecy. Cena pulled out his hunting knife and pressed the blade against the growth. Instead of sinking into plant tissue, it skittered across the surface with a metallic screech that echoed through the canyon. Sparks actually flew from the contact point. Whatever was inside that cactus was made of metal, and it was solid. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide something out here in the middle of nowhere. They had chosen this remote canyon, this specific cactus, and somehow managed to bury their secret inside a living plant. It was the kind of hiding place that spoke of desperation, of secrets too dangerous to trust to any ordinary vault or safe. As Cena stood in the shadow of that towering cactus, sweat dripping from his brow, he realized his peaceful desert retreat had just become something else entirely. He had stumbled onto a mystery that had waited patiently for decades to be uncovered. The desert had kept its secret faithfully, but now it had chosen him to be the instrument of revelation. He looked up at Luna, who watched him with patient brown eyes, then back at the cactus. Whatever was hidden inside that growth, it wasn't meant to stay buried forever. The desert was ready to give back what it had been holding. Cena knew he was out of his depth. Whatever was sealed inside that cactus required more than a hunting knife and determination. He needed help, and he needed it fast. The isolation that had seemed so appealing that morning now felt like a liability. Out here, miles from the nearest road, he was completely alone with a discovery that could change everything. He walked back to Luna and retrieved his satellite phone from the saddlebags. Fame had its advantages, and one of them was never being truly cut off from the world. The device chirped as it searched for a signal, finally connecting with a reassuring beep. Cena dialed a number he had memorized but hoped never to use, a direct line to federal authorities that his security team had insisted he carry. "This is John Cena," he said when the call connected. "I need immediate assistance at my location. I've discovered something in the desert that requires federal attention." He paused, looking back at the cactus. "There's metal hidden inside a saguaro cactus. This isn't natural, and it's not recent. I'm sending my coordinates now." The voice on the other end was professional but skeptical. "Mr. Cena, can you be more specific about the nature of your discovery?" Someone buried something inside a living cactus. The plant grew around it over what must be decades. Whatever's inside is substantial and was hidden for a reason. I need extraction tools and personnel who can handle evidence properly." There was a pause then. "Copy that. Units are en route. ETA 2 hours. Secure the site and wait for our arrival. Do not attempt further excavation." Cena ended the call and settled into the shade of a nearby boulder to wait. 2 hours in the desert felt like an eternity, especially when his mind raced with possibilities. What could be so valuable or dangerous that someone would go to such extraordinary lengths to hide it? The level of planning required was staggering. Whoever had done this had to know the desert intimately, understand how saguaros grow, and have the patience to wait decades for their secret to be truly secure. As he waited, Cena studied the cactus more carefully. The trunk was ancient, scarred by decades of storms and brutal summers. Lightning had struck it at least once, leaving a blackened groove along one side, but it had survived, grown stronger, become a monument to endurance in this harsh landscape. The irony wasn't lost on him. This symbol of survival had become a vault for someone else's buried past. The growl of engines finally broke the desert silence. Cena stood as 2 armored vehicles crested the ridge, dust plumes trailing behind them like brown banners. Border Patrol agents emerged, their faces skeptical but alert. The lead agent, a weathered man named Rodriguez, approached with the confident stride of someone who had seen it all. "You're sure about this, Mr. Cena?" Rodriguez asked, studying the cactus. "Because if this is some kind of publicity stunt—" "Touch it yourself," Cena interrupted, pointing to the growth. "Tell me that's natural." Rodriguez pressed his gloved hand against the bulge and immediately stiffened. He tapped it twice, and the hollow metallic ring echoed through the canyon. His skepticism evaporated instantly. "Jesus, there really is something inside." He turned to his team. "Get the generator and power tools. We're going to need them." The next hour was filled with the screaming whine of power saws and the acrid smell of burning cactus flesh. The ancient plant gave up its secret reluctantly, each cut requiring tremendous effort. Sparks flew as the saws encountered whatever was buried within, and the agents had to work in shifts to avoid exhaustion in the brutal heat. Finally, with a metallic thud that seemed to echo forever, a large object fell free from the cactus's embrace. It landed on the rocky ground with the unmistakable weight of solid metal. Cena and the agent stared in amazement at what they had uncovered. It was a chest, roughly 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, made of thick steel that had been eaten by rust, but remained structurally sound. The corners were reinforced with heavy brackets, and what had once been a complex locking mechanism was now corroded beyond recognition. But most importantly, it was sealed tight, its contents protected by layers of metal and decades of plant growth. "How long has this been here?" the youngest agent whispered. Rodriguez knelt beside the chest, running his fingers along its edges. "Look at this corrosion pattern. I'd say at least 40 years, maybe more. And see these tool marks? Someone forced this inside the cactus when it was much smaller. They waited for it to grow around their hiding place." The implications were staggering. Someone had played a game measured in decades, hiding something so important they were willing to wait a lifetime for it to be truly secure. The question now was what could be worth such an elaborate scheme. "We need to open it," Cena said quietly. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "But not here. This goes back to base for proper examination. Whatever's inside has waited this long. It can wait a few more hours." As the agents loaded the chest into their vehicle, Cena felt the weight of discovery settling on his shoulders. His peaceful desert ride had uncovered something that had been sleeping in the earth for decades. The cactus, now scarred and hollow, stood like a sentinel that had finally completed its long vigil. But as they prepared to leave the canyon, Cena noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks in the sand, barely visible but definitely recent. They weren't alone out here. Someone else knew about this place, and they had been watching. The desert was about to give up more than just one buried secret. The convoy moved through the desert like a procession of armed ghosts, dust clouds trailing behind each vehicle as they navigated the treacherous terrain. The steel chest rattled in the back of the lead truck, its presence seeming to grow heavier with each mile. Cena rode alongside on Luna, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. The tire tracks he had spotted near the cactus haunted his thoughts like a bad omen. Agent Rodriguez had tried to convince him to ride inside one of the armored vehicles, but Cena refused. On horseback, he could see farther, move faster if needed, and most importantly, his instincts worked better when he wasn't trapped inside a metal box. Those same instincts were screaming now, warning him that they were walking into a trap. The desert seemed different on the return journey. What had felt like peaceful isolation now felt like exposure. Every ridge could hide watchers. Every canyon could conceal an ambush. The chest they carried was more than evidence. It was bait, drawing hungry eyes from across the wasteland. "Contact!" Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "Multiple vehicles approaching from the northeast. They're not responding to our signals." Cena spurred Luna to higher ground and pulled out his binoculars. What he saw made his stomach drop. 6 pickup trucks were racing toward them across the desert floor, dust plumes marking their progress like war banners. Each truck was loaded with armed men, and they were moving with military precision. "It's an ambush," Cena called into his radio. "Get into defensive positions now." The first shots rang out before his warning finished echoing. Bullets whined through the air, some striking the armored vehicles with metallic clangs, others spraying sand as they hit the ground. The convoy lurched to a halt as agents scrambled for cover behind their vehicles. Cena dismounted and slapped Luna's flank, sending her racing toward a cluster of boulders where she would be safe. Then he drew his revolver and moved into position behind a rocky outcrop. The weapon felt solid in his hand, its weight familiar from years of training at shooting ranges. But this wasn't target practice. This was life or death. The attacking vehicles spread out in a classic flanking maneuver, trying to surround the convoy. These weren't desperate criminals making a grab for easy money. This was organized, professional, deadly. Whoever wanted that chest back had resources and experience. How did they know? Rodriguez shouted over the gunfire. Cena squeezed off 2 careful shots, forcing one of the attackers to duck behind his truck's engine block. "Someone's been watching that cactus for a long time," he called back. They knew exactly where to look. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The desert became a chaos of muzzle flashes, ricocheting bullets, and shouted commands. One agent went down with a shoulder wound, dragged to safety by his partner. Another's rifle jammed at the worst possible moment, leaving him exposed until Cena provided covering fire. But the attackers had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated John Cena. In the wrestling ring, he was known for never giving up, never backing down. Those same qualities served him well in a firefight. While the agents focused on basic survival, Cena pressed the attack. He moved from cover to cover like a man possessed, his revolver barking with deadly accuracy. Years of physical training had given him the strength and endurance to fight when others would have faltered. More importantly, his ability to read opponents and predict their moves translated perfectly to combat. "The leader's in the red truck," Cena shouted to Rodriguez. "Take him out and the rest will scatter." Working together, they concentrated their fire on the vehicle Cena had identified. The truck's windshield exploded in a shower of glass, and its driver slumped over the wheel. The vehicle careened into a boulder and burst into flames, sending a pillar of black smoke into the desert sky. The effect was immediate. The remaining attackers began to withdraw, dragging their wounded with them. They had expected easy prey, a few Border Patrol agents protecting a mysterious find. Instead, they had run into a buzzsaw named John Cena, and their carefully planned ambush had become a rout. As the dust settled and the sound of retreating engines faded, an eerie quiet returned to the desert. The agents checked their wounds and counted ammunition, while Cena scanned the horizon for any sign of further trouble. The immediate threat was over, but he knew this was far from finished. "How many did we lose?" Rodriguez asked grimly. "2 wounded, none dead," came the reply. "But they'll be back. And next time they'll come with more men." Cena holstered his weapon and looked at the chest, still chained in the back of the lead vehicle. "Whatever's in there, people are willing to kill for it, which means we need to get it somewhere safe before they try again." Rodriguez nodded. "El Paso Federal Facility. It's got the security we need and the resources to properly examine whatever we found." As they prepared to move out again, Cena caught Luna and swung back into the saddle. The horse was skittish from the gunfire, but responded to his calm confidence. Together, they had survived their first real test in the desert, but both man and animal knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The convoy resumed its journey, moving faster now, more urgently. Behind them, the smoke from the burning truck continued to rise into the clear desert air like a signal fire. Somewhere out there, other eyes were watching, other plans were being made. The chest rattled in its chains, carrying secrets that had already cost blood, and Cena suspected it would demand much more before its story was fully told. The desert never forgot, and it never forgave. Whatever they had uncovered was worth killing for, which meant it was also worth dying for. The question was, who would pay the ultimate price before this was over? The federal facility in El Paso rose from the desert like a fortress of glass and steel, its walls topped with razor wire, and its gates guarded by men with automatic weapons. After the chaos of the ambush, the compound felt like sanctuary. But as the convoy passed through the heavily secured entrance, Cena noticed something that made his jaw tighten. Too many people were watching their arrival with too much interest. Word was already spreading. The chest was immediately transferred to a secure examination room under the watchful eyes of federal investigators. Agent Rodriguez supervised the process, but Cena could see the strain in his face. The attack in the desert had shaken everyone. This wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a target that attracted killers, like carrion draws vultures. Dr. Sarah Chun, the facility's chief forensic specialist, approached the chest with the reverence of an archaeologist uncovering a pharaoh's tomb. She wore thick gloves and used precision tools to carefully work at the corroded locks. The metal composition is consistent with military-grade storage containers from the 1970s, she announced to the assembled team. Whatever's inside has been sealed for at least 40 years. The locks finally gave way with a grinding screech of protesting metal. Dr. Chun lifted the lid slowly, and everyone in the room held their breath. What they saw defied every expectation. Bundles of cash, hundreds of them, wrapped in yellowed plastic and bound with rotting rubber bands. But this wasn't just money, it was a fortune. Even accounting for decades of inflation, there had to be millions of dollars packed into that steel box. Some of the bills were so old they featured designs that hadn't been used in decades. But money wasn't the only treasure the chest contained. Beneath the cash, wrapped in waterproof plastic, were documents. Ledgers, maps, photographs, and lists of names written in faded ink. Dr. Chen handled them with tweezers, placing each item on a sterile examination table under bright lights. "My God," she whispered as she studied the papers. "These are smuggling routes. Detailed maps showing border crossings, safe houses, contact points. And look at these names. Some of them are still active in law enforcement and politics." Agent Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder, his face growing pale as he recognized some of the names on the lists. "The Ghost Caravan," he said quietly. Everyone thought it was just a legend. Stories told around campfires about a smuggling operation so sophisticated it could move anything across the border without a trace. Cena studied the documents from across the room, his mind racing. This isn't just evidence of old crimes. These routes, these contacts, some of them are probably still in use. This chest is a roadmap to active criminal operations. The implications were staggering. What they had discovered wasn't just historical evidence. It was a live bomb that could destroy careers, topple criminal empires, and expose corruption reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement. No wonder people were willing to kill for it. But as the team worked to catalog and photograph every piece of evidence, Cena began to notice troubling signs. Whispered conversations in corners, nervous glances. The young agent who had fought beside him in the desert, Torres, kept staring at the bundles of money with hungry eyes. The temptation was obvious. With so much cash, who would notice if a bundle or two went missing? These were working men with families, mortgages, and dreams that government salaries could never fulfill. The Ghost Caravan's treasure was testing everyone's integrity. "We need to move this to Washington immediately," Dr. Chen announced. "This is too important and too dangerous to keep here." Rodriguez nodded, but Cena caught the hesitation in his voice. "We'll need time to arrange proper transport. This level of security requires—" "No," Cena interrupted firmly. "Every hour we wait increases the danger. There are people out there who know we have this, and they're not going to give up." As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as guards rushed to defensive positions. Over the intercom, a voice crackled with tension. "Perimeter breach. Multiple contacts approaching from all directions. All personnel to emergency stations." Through the reinforced windows, Cena could see vehicles racing across the desert toward the compound. Not the scattered pickup trucks from the earlier ambush, but military-style assault vehicles moving in coordinated formation. Whoever wanted the chest back had escalated dramatically. "They're not coming to negotiate," Cena said grimly. He turned to Rodriguez. "How many men do you have?" 40 guards, maybe 50. But we're not equipped for a full-scale assault." The building shook as the first explosions rocked the perimeter. These weren't desperate criminals anymore. This was a military operation. Someone with serious resources had decided that the Ghost Caravan's secrets were worth open warfare. In the chaos of the alarm, Cena noticed Torres edging toward the examination table where the money was displayed. The young agent's face was twisted with desperate calculation. He was planning to grab what he could in the confusion, thinking no one would notice in the middle of a battle. "Don't do it, Torres," Cena said quietly. The agent spun around, his hand halfway to his weapon. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And if you take even $1 from that chest, you become part of the problem instead of the solution." Torres's face crumpled with shame and fear. The battle raging outside seemed to emphasize the impossible choice he faced: duty or desperation, integrity or instant wealth. Before he could respond, the lights went out. Emergency generators kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in harsh white light. Through the windows, muzzle flashes lit up the night like deadly fireflies. The siege had begun, and the chest, with all its secrets and temptations, sat in the middle of it all like the eye of a hurricane. The Ghost Caravan's final gambit was about to play out, and John Cena found himself standing between the past and the future, between corruption and justice. The desert had given up its secret, But it wasn't finished exacting its price. The federal facility had become a war zone. Gunfire rattled the reinforced windows, while explosions lit up the desert night like deadly fireworks. John Cena pressed himself against the wall of the examination room, his mind calculating their options. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and trapped in a building that was quickly becoming a tomb. "How long until backup arrives?" he shouted to Rodriguez over the chaos. 2 hours, maybe 3. The agent replied grimly. "We're on our own until then." Cena looked at the chest, its contents spread across examination tables like pieces of a deadly puzzle. 40 years of buried secrets had finally clawed their way into the light, and now people were dying for them. The ghost caravan's legacy was written in blood, and it wasn't finished claiming victims. The attack wasn't random or desperate. These were professionals with military equipment and tactical training. They had planned this assault carefully, waiting for the perfect moment when the evidence was concentrated in one location. Now they were executing their plan with ruthless precision. "They're not here to steal the money," Cena realized aloud. "They're here to destroy the evidence. The cash is just a bonus. What they really want is to burn those documents before anyone can act on them." Dr. Chun was frantically photographing the most important papers, her camera flash strobing like lightning in the darkened room. "If we can digitize the key evidence, copies can be transmitted to multiple agencies," she called out. "Even if they destroy the originals, the truth will survive." But the attackers weren't giving them time for careful documentation. Another explosion, closer this time, sent cracked spider webbing across the reinforced glass. Emergency lights flickered, casting crazy shadows on the walls. The facility's defenses were crumbling under the sustained assault. Agent Torres stood frozen in the middle of the room, his face a mask of terror and indecision. The temptation of the money warred with his duty, while the sound of approaching gunfire reminded him that both choices might be irrelevant if they didn't survive the next hour. "Torres," Cena said firmly, "I need you to help Dr. Chun protect those documents. Can you do that?" The young agent nodded shakily, finding purpose in the direct command. He moved to help the forensic specialist, his hands steadier now that he had a clear mission. Sometimes in crisis, duty provided its own strength. The main doors burst open in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Black-clad figures poured through the breach, their weapons trained and ready. These weren't border bandits or desperate criminals. They moved with the discipline of Special Forces operators. Cena stepped into their path, his revolver steady in his hands. The first shot took down the lead attacker, but there were too many behind him. Bullets filled the air like angry hornets, forcing everyone to dive for cover behind overturned tables and equipment. "The documents!" Dr. Chun screamed as a stray bullet struck her camera, shattering it into useless pieces. Rodriguez crawled across the floor toward a backup communication system, trying to call for immediate help. But a burst of automatic weapons fire sent him scrambling back to cover. The attackers were systematic, professional, closing off every escape route and cutting every line of communication. In the chaos, Cena saw Torres making his choice. Instead of grabbing money, the young agent threw himself over the examination table where the most sensitive documents were spread. Bullets meant for the papers struck him instead, and he crumpled to the floor with blood spreading across his chest. The sacrifice galvanized everyone in the room. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about justice, truth, and the memory of a young man who had chosen duty over greed. The ghost caravan had claimed another victim, but Torres's death wouldn't be meaningless. Cena rose from cover, his weapon empty, but his determination complete. He charged the nearest attacker with nothing but his bare hands, years of wrestling training channeled into pure combat fury. The impact sent both men crashing through the damaged window in an explosion of glass and blood. They hit the desert floor hard, rolling across sand and rock in a deadly embrace. Cena's opponent was trained, dangerous, but he had never faced someone who had spent years learning to absorb punishment and keep fighting. The struggle was brief and brutal. When it ended, only Cena rose. But the victory was temporary. More attackers were flooding through the building, and the local defenders were being overwhelmed. The chest and its secrets were about to fall into the wrong hands, erasing 40 years of evidence and ensuring that the ghost caravan's crimes would never be exposed. Then the sound of helicopters filled the night air. Not the attackers' aircraft, but military birds carrying federal reinforcements. Someone had decided that this situation required maximum response, and help was finally arriving. The tide of battle shifted rapidly. Caught between the facility's defenders and the arriving reinforcements, the attackers found themselves trapped. Some fought to the death rather than be captured. Others threw down their weapons and surrendered, perhaps calculating that prison was better than whatever their employers would do to them for failing. As dawn broke over the desert, the federal facility looked like a battlefield. Smoke drifted from burning vehicles, glass crunched underfoot, and the smell of cordite hung heavy in the air. But the chest remained intact, its secrets preserved despite the night of violence. John Cena stood in the wreckage of the examination room, looking down at Torres's still form. The young agent had died protecting evidence that would expose decades of corruption and crime. His sacrifice had ensured that the ghost caravan's final secret would see daylight. Dr. Chun had managed to save most of the crucial documents, sealing them in protective cases that would preserve them as evidence. The names, routes, and connections detailed in those papers would lead to dozens of arrests and convictions. The ghost caravan's network was about to collapse under the weight of its own buried truth. "Is it over?" Rodriguez asked wearily. Cena looked out at the desert, where the cactus that had started it all stood scarred and hollow against the morning sky. The desert never forgot, his father had said. It kept everything until it was ready to give it back. "This part is over," he replied quietly, "but the reckoning is just beginning." The chest was loaded onto a helicopter bound for Washington, its contents finally free to tell their story. The ghost caravan had hidden its secrets for 40 years, buried them in the living flesh of the desert itself. But truth, like the desert, was patient and implacable. It had waited decades for the right moment and the right person to bring it into the light. John Cena had come to the Texas desert, seeking solitude and peace. Instead, he had become the instrument of justice, the man chosen by fate and circumstance to unearth secrets that powerful people had killed to keep buried. As he rode Luna away from the battle-scarred facility, he could see the cactus in the distance, standing like a monument to the price of truth. The desert had given up its secret at last, but that secret would continue to exact its price for years to come. Behind him, investigators swarmed over the evidence that would reshape law enforcement along the border. Ahead of him, the desert stretched endless and eternal, keeping its remaining secrets until the time came to give them back. The ghost caravan was finally dead, but its legacy would live on in the lives saved by exposing its network of corruption and crime. And John Cena, wrestling superstar turned unlikely hero, had learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not in arenas filled with cheering crowds, but in the silent places where truth waits patiently to be discovered. The desert never forgets, and now neither would the world.